I'm joined from London by Dr. Angus Lockyer, a lecturer in the history of Japan at the School of Oriental and African Studies. Welcome, Dr. Lockyer. Now, Motoya, the founder of the APA Group, is also the deputy director of a support group for Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. In the book, he implies that he will use the money he makes from his hotel business to support his own political views. Dr. Lockyer, what do you think of this revisionist trend in Japan? Is it widespread or isolated to just a few extremists?
It's a difficult question. There is a segment of Japanese society, some very influential, like this man, who has a very particular view of the Second World War, of the Asia-Pacific War. It's not widespread. It's not the majority opinion at all. I think there are minorities on the left and the right, but most Japanese people are somewhere in the middle. The problem, of course, is many people don't know what happened. The education system in Japan, as in many countries, paints a partial view of the past, and so I think there's room for people like Mr. Motoda to make hay here, not very helpfully, of course.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that people were particularly offended by was the fact that he plans to use the revenue of his hotel business to support his rightist historic views. And a lot of people who are staying in these hotels are tourists from China and from South Korea. So without knowing, they will be paying to support the kind of views that really deny that their parent or grandparent generation were put under extreme atrocity by Japanese soldiers during Second World War.
Indeed. I think the important thing to say here is, first, Mr. Motoda is not a historian. There is no real dispute among historians that these things happened. He's a businessman. From the sounds of it, I'm not sure if he's a very good businessman or if his business model allows the loss of so much custom from overseas. You know, if I was a visitor from Korea or China, I would not stay in his hotels. Personally, I have never stayed in his hotels, and this would just reinforce my choice. I think there is, you see it not only in Japan, a degree of political entrepreneurship by businessmen these days, channeling profits into political activity. And I think one of the things that's encouraging, perhaps, with social media, but also with the mainstream media, is that it becomes easier to track this and for this to get publicity so that people can know, who they're patronizing. So I see this as somebody who I would rather he stuck to business. I do not agree with his political opinions. Of course, he has a right to make them. Again, he's not a historian, but he is clearly politically influential, and that is concerning.
And he's very stubborn. I mean, the fact that the video went out and a lot of people criticized it, and he also got a lot of requests to withdraw these books, and he refused to do that, saying unless they get official notification or official request from the Japanese government, he's not going to retreat these books. And then he also went on to say that actually this kind of controversy will make his business more known to other people, and in the end, although right now he might lose some business, in the long run he's probably going to profit from this kind of controversy. How do you look at that? I mean, this for me it's just beyond reason unbelievable that someone can actually count on this kind of publicity.
Yeah, I think we are in a moment where two things are going on. The first thing is that we've heard the phrase post-fact bandied around quite a lot last year, with decisions in Europe, in America, based on very bad information, and people not only not having the right information, but thinking it's okay to have the wrong information, and to make hay with that. In a press conference in Washington, D.C. Just yesterday, we heard the phrase alternative fact, and of course everybody pours scorn on this, but there does seem to be a kind of an agreement generally that it's okay not to go with the facts. That's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is that again, globally at the moment, we're at a moment where people seem to be retreating from a kind of international conversation back within their own smaller enclaves, either within countries or to their country, to a kind of nationalist position. This is not just the case in Japan. And he does have a market for this kind of stuff in Japan. There is a cohort in Japan. There is a market segment, if you like, and also among younger people, which concerns me. There is a kind of appetite for not revisiting the past endlessly, but the problem, of course, is that the story about the past is a profoundly flawed one. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a concern for me as a teacher, as a professor, as a historian, mm-hmm. that we need to do better in kind of establishing a basis upon which we can have these kinds of discussions, and prevent people like Mr. Motoda pretending that he knows anything about the issue, because he doesn't.
Yeah, but this is very worrying if you're talking about educating the younger
Indeed.
generation. On the one hand, time is history is fading away. I mean, the survivors of the Second World War are dying out. And on the other hand, the history
Indeed.
books have been rewritten, have been revised so that the contents concerning the atrocity committed by Japanese soldiers during Second World War are really left to the minimum. Given all of these signs, I don't think we can be very optimistic about how the younger generation are going to view that particular segment of history.
I agree, and I think the concern, again, I think it's important to underline this, is more general than Japan. History across the world is still largely written in national terms. This is true within East Asia, not just Japan, Korea, even China itself. History in this country has taken a slightly odd turn into the nation, and certainly this is true elsewhere. So I think we have more work to do on this. On the other hand, there are people doing this work. There are scholars, my colleagues in China, Korea, and Japan are coming together to write different kinds of history books, mm-hmm. which try to establish a common basis. But I think as long as we think of history as something primarily defined by a country, then we're going to keep running into these problems, because of course each country wants a good story about its past and would prefer not to look at the more problematic parts of it. So I think we do need a sea change. I think some people are working towards that. At the moment, we're not in a good moment for that kind of change in history education, but also education more broadly towards an international and kind of collaborative perspective. So I think there's work to do, but I think there are a lot of us who would like to do that work.
Mm-hmm. How do you think the Chinese government or the Chinese public can do to bring about some better understanding of history to the Japanese public? The National Tourism Administration of China has decided to boycott the Upper Hotel, but there is only so much we can do. How do you think we as Chinese and the Chinese government can help maybe remind the Japanese people and the Japanese government a bit better what they have done in history?
Indeed. I think it's an important question, because I think it's a responsibility for all of us to foster a more productive conversation. I think on the narrow issue of Mr. Motoda and his hotels, I would not stay there. Again, I would treat him as a businessman. I would not treat him as a historian. And I think the more oxygen you give to people like him, as he points out, no publicity is bad publicity. He can thrive on this. So I simply think that ignoring this man is the best way to go. As a historian, because he's not a serious one. But on the other hand, I think we do have to make moves to learn more about history from other people's perspectives. One of the things I always say as a historian is that the joy of studying the past is you're always surprised. It forces you to move away from your own perspective and try to understand things from another perspective, from the perspective of someone a long time ago, from the perspective of somebody in a different country. And one of the things we learn in history is there is always going to be more than one perspective on an event. In the case of the Nanjing Massacre, the basic facts are known. The numbers are in dispute because the records are so fragmentary. But I think we have to make efforts to reach beyond the communities within which we're comfortable if we're going to use the study of the past to build a better present and a better future. I think it's a very simple lesson in some ways.
Okay, finally, the furor over the books which promote the claim that Japanese forces do not massacre Chinese civilians during the Nanjing Massacre in 1937 has prompted a rebuke from Beijing and threats of boycott from Chinese travelers, a fast-growing and economically important group for Japan. Now, the number of foreigners visiting Japan was some 24 million last year, fueled in large part by a surge of visitors from China looking for some good food, quality shopping. What will will be, in your mind, the economic impact on Japanese tourism following the release of this video? And where do you think Japanese business can go, given the kind of impact, given the kind of difference in political views or historic views?
I think, well, I hope very much that on both sides, Chinese tourists, the Chinese government, as well as Japanese government, Japanese businesses, continue to work together to foster a better relationship. I think we should marginalize people like Mr. Motoda. He's not worth the trouble, quite honestly. But I think these two countries, both historically and in the present, have a huge amount to gain by working together. I understand why Chinese tourists go to Japan. I love going to Japan myself. It is a wonderful place to visit, as is China. And I think we have to continue at all levels, so at official levels, between businesses, and also at private levels as individuals, to build these ties between countries within a region that is so crucial to the future of the world. And I also think I'm a glass half full kind of guy. I'm not quite an optimist, but I always try and look on the bright side. My sense is that in both countries, increasingly, the vast majority of people are pragmatists. They understand that they share a region. They are interested in others. Occasionally we have flare-ups around some issues which are not resolved, both about the past and in the present. But I set great store in the decency and pragmatism of the majority of people on both sides. So again, you know, I think for Chinese consumers, Chinese individuals, please keep going to Japan. Don't set store always in social media. Social media can sometimes inflame these things in a very unproductive way. And I think, you know, we need to move past Mr. Motoda. I mean, he's an important businessman, he's a very rich man, but he's only one man with one voice, and his voice is profoundly misinformed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angus Lockyer, joining us from London. He's a lecturer in history of Japan at the School of Oriental and African Studies.